Good morning and welcome to Corner Coffee with Cricket. Grab your mug, settle in, and let's spend some time together. I'm Ava, and I am truly honored that Cricket has asked me to step in and host this particular session with you. We are currently in episode 5 of the book When Life Changed, I Fought Back, and today we move into part 8. This is, without a doubt, the most emotional chapter of the journey so far. It's a part of the story that carries a lot of weight and a lot of heart, so we're going to take our time with it today. Let's get into the heart of the fight.
Imagine surviving a 2-year, just grueling biological war.
Right.
You've suffered through dozens of treatments, lived in total isolation, and literally pushed your body to the absolute limit.
Yeah, it's unimaginable.
And then finally your phone rings.
Hmm.
It's your doctor, and he delivers the exact words you've been praying for. He says you are 100% cancer-free.
Wow.
But in the exact moment you hear those words, you're standing in your driveway, watching an ambulance pull away with your husband inside.
Oh, man.
You've won the war, but you instantly realize you're about to lose the person you fought it for.
It's just devastating.
It really is. And well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a profoundly personal, medically fascinating, and ultimately heartbreaking excerpt from Chapter 8 of Cricket Fox's new book.
Yes.
The book is called When Life Changed, I Fought Back. And for those of you listening, you might already know Cricket from her really popular Corner Coffee with Cricket blog and her own shows.
Yeah, it is a phenomenal piece of writing, primarily because it doesn't just give us, the clinical notes of a medical trial.
Right, it's so much more than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It operates on two distinct intertwined levels. We're looking at the absolute cutting edge of biological engineering alongside the raw, unfiltered reality of what that science actually asks of a family.
Yeah, and that perfectly sets up our twofold mission for today.
Mm.
First, we're going to dissect a monumental shift in medical strategy.
Right.
We really want to understand the transition from the sheer brute force of traditional chemotherapy to the targeted microscopic precision of immunotherapy.
Which is huge.
It is. And second, we are going to explore the deeply human, emotional toll of navigating a 2-year clinical trial alongside a spouse who is also battling their own health crisis.
It's a masterclass in the science of survival, honestly.
Yeah.
But equally, an exploration of the psychology of caregiving.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this, because we cannot appreciate the sheer elegance of this new immunotherapy trial without first looking at the physical and psychological reality Cricket was facing beforehand.
We have to understand what she was desperately trying to escape.
Exactly. We have to examine her chemotherapy era, or, as she so accurately categorizes it in the book, the era of the blunt instrument.
The blunt instrument. It's such a perfect phrase.
It really is. I mean, she describes a life entirely dictated by this rigid, punishing Monday to Thursday cycle.
Yeah.
Every Monday, she would go in for treatment, and she compares the process to a carpet bombing of her own system.
And medically speaking, carpet bombing is a highly accurate description of how traditional chemotherapy functions.
Really?
Yeah, chemo is designed to attack rapidly dividing cells.
Okay.
The problem is, the drug doesn't possess the intelligence to differentiate between a rapidly dividing cancer cell and a rapidly dividing healthy cell.
Ah, like the cells in your hair follicles or your stomach?
Exactly. Hair follicles, your digestive tract, your bone marrow. So it simply levels the entire landscape.
Wow.
The collateral damage to the human body is just catastrophic.
Which totally explains why she was literally put on her backside for days at a time.
Right.
She notes that she wouldn't even start feeling vaguely human again until Thursday. And during those agonizing recovery days, she had to drastically up her protein intake. She was essentially shoveling raw materials into her body just to help her tissues rebuild from the demolition.
Because it is quite literally a cycle of demolition and reconstruction.
Right.
But the most dangerous consequence of that systemic demolition isn't just the fatigue or the nausea, as terrible as those are.
Right, there's a bigger issue.
Yeah. It is the fact that chemotherapy wipes out your white blood cells.
Oh, wow.
It leaves you with effectively zero immune system. You become a blank slate, entirely vulnerable to microscopic threats that a healthy body would just fight off without you ever noticing.
And that profound vulnerability forced Cricket and her husband Phil into a state of extreme isolation.
They had no choice.
Because Phil's immune system was also compromised by his own health struggles, they just couldn't risk any exposure.
No, not at all.
They had to construct this incredibly strict, suffocating bubble around themselves.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and trying to imagine that level of lockdown, picture treating a simple trip for groceries like a tactical military mission.
The outside world completely transforms.
It really does.
It stops being a place of opportunity or community, and it becomes this landscape of constant, invisible threats.
Yeah, they became absolute masters of the Woolworths direct-to-boot pickup service.
I bet.
And on the rare occasions they absolutely had to physically step foot inside a shop, they had to strategize.
Right, like planning an operation.
Exactly. They would go late at night, right before closing, or at the absolute crack of dawn, specifically to avoid breathing the same air as a crowd of strangers.
The psychological toll of that kind of vigilance is enormous.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
You are constantly scanning for danger.
Yeah.
She mentions in the text that sometimes the walls of their house would feel like they were closing in so tightly that they couldn't even breathe.
Yeah.
They would just get in their car and drive.
It's just to get out.
Right, they weren't going to a destination. They just needed to look at different scenery through the safety of the windshield, just to escape the physical confines of the house and the psychological confines of asking, what if, all day long.
They were living entirely in the shadows.
Yeah.
But then the entire paradigm shifts. Cricket gets accepted into a new clinical trial for immunotherapy, and the strategy flips completely.
It's a total 180.
Right. Instead of bringing in toxic outside chemicals to do the killing for you, this trial is essentially a highly classified internal training program for the body itself.
What's fascinating here is the specific two-part biological protocol she underwent.
Okay.
And why the exact order of that protocol was the key to making the whole thing work. We are moving away from the blunt instrument and stepping into the realm of precise biological engineering.
Well, let's get into the mechanics of that, because in her trial, there were 2 specific drugs administered in a very intentional sequence.
Exactly. So the first drug administered was called TransCon IL-2.
IL-2, got it.
In biological terms, think of this as the reinforcer, or like a massive systemic recruitment drive.
Okay.
This drug's job is to flood the patient's system with strong, brand new immune cells. You are effectively drafting and building up a massive army of security guards inside your own body.
Wait, I'm confused here.
Okay.
If you're flooding the system with this massive, energized new army of immune cells using IL-2, shouldn't they just automatically overwhelm the cancer?
You would think so.
Like, why wouldn't that massive army just win the war on its own? Why do we even need a second drug?
That is the million-dollar question in oncology.
Really?
Yeah. You would think a massive army would be enough, but cancer is incredibly deceptive. It doesn't just aggressively multiply, it actively hides.
Oh, I see.
Cancer cells produce specific proteins on their surface that essentially act as a biological secret handshake.
Wow.
Right? So when one of your new immune cells bumps into a cancer cell, the cancer uses that protein to send a signal that says, hey, don't cheat, I'm supposed to be here.
That's terrifying.
It essentially wears a mask. So you can have the largest, strongest immune army in the world, but if the soldiers are being tricked into walking right past the enemy, the army is useless.
Okay. The cancer is actively turning off the immune response.
Exactly.
Which means that massive army needs better intelligence.
Precisely. And that requires part 2 of the protocol.
Okay.
Once the foundation is laid and the IL-2 has recruited the massive army, they administer the second drug, pembrolizumab.
Pembrolizumab.
Yes. And this drug is the unmasker.
Okay, how does the unmasker actually work?
Pembrolizumab specifically targets and blocks those deceptive proteins on the cancer cells.
Oh, wow.
It literally pulls the masks off.
Mm-hmm.
It takes the blindfolds off that newly energized immune army you just built, and it points a massive spotlight at the tumors, saying, okay, team, ignore the secret handshake.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the targets.
I love this concept. Let's look at it this way.
Okay.
Traditional chemo is like deciding to demolish an entire city block with dynamite just to guarantee you catch a single burglar hiding in one of the houses.
Right.
You get the burglar, but you destroy the neighborhood in the process.
Exactly.
This specific immunotherapy protocol, though, is entirely different.
Mm-hmm.
The TransCon IL-2 is like recruiting a massive, highly motivated neighborhood watch program.
Yes.
And then the pembrolizumab is handing every single one of those watchmen a pair of night vision goggles so they can finally see the thieves hiding in the bushes.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Thanks.
You are building the internal capacity first, and then you are providing the targeted intelligence. It's a complete system recalibration.
Yeah.
You aren't destroying the body to save it. You're restoring the body's natural ability to protect itself.
But I do have to push back on the reality of that a bit.
Sure.
Because System recalibration sounds very clean and clinical.
Fair enough.
Does this shift from a carpet bombing to a precision strike mean the physical toll just magically vanishes? Like, does Cricket just get this infusion and walk out of the clinic on Monday afternoon feeling totally fine?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
It is a more elegant science,
Yes.
but it is still a massive, taxing biological event.
Makes sense.
The schedule was still heavily anchored to her Mondays at the clinic. However, the nature of the recovery shifted in a very meaningful way.
Yeah, she describes the Tuesday after treatment not as a day of violent, devastating sickness like the chemo days,
Right.
but as a flat day. A day characterized by deep, quiet, just overwhelming fatigue.
Which is perfectly logical when you understand the mechanism we just discussed.
How so?
Well, her body isn't fighting off toxic chemicals anymore, but it is expending an unfathomable amount of microscopic energy, synthesizing millions of no immune cells, and fighting a highly localized internal war.
Oh.
That requires massive energetic resources. But the crucial difference between the two treatments is the turnaround time.
Right. Because by Thursday, she notes that she could actually get up and do small jobs around the house.
Yeah.
And while doing a few dishes or folding laundry sounds minor to a healthy person, Cricket explicitly notes that it gave her back a crucial sense of usefulness.
That's so important.
It really pulled her out of the total helpless isolation of the chemo years.
And that introduces a fascinating ripple effect into their lives.
Definitely.
Because when Cricket's physical reality changed, when she got a fraction of her energy and her agency back on those Thursdays, the entire delicate caregiving ecosystem she shared with her husband, Phil, was suddenly thrown out of balance and had to adapt.
This is where we get into the profound logistics of managing an illness within a marriage.
Yeah.
Because as part of this new clinical trial, Cricket was given a massive new perk, a professional car service to take her to and from the clinic.
Right, and on paper, if you were looking at this purely practically, that is a massive blessing. Phil wasn't feeling well himself. He didn't have the stamina for the long, stressful drive into the city.
No.
And he desperately needed the comfort of his own home, not the stiff, unforgiving plastic of a hospital waiting room chair.
But this is where Cricket's emotional intelligence really shines.
Oh, absolutely.
She immediately recognized a massive psychological landmine sitting right in the middle of that practical blessing.
Yeah.
She was terrified that if she just took the car service both ways, Phil would feel replaced by a professional driver.
This highlights what we might call the caregiver's paradox.
Right.
The logistics required to simply survive an illness often threaten the dignity and the identity of the person providing the care.
That's so true.
Even as the patient who is literally fighting cancer,
Yeah.
Cricket is actively, continuously managing her partner's psychological well-being.
Yeah.
She understands that for years, Phil's identity has been entirely tied up in being her protector, her driver, her primary support system. If you automate that away, what is left for him?
So she orchestrates this incredibly delicate, highly intentional compromise. She decides to book the car service just for the trip into the city.
Right.
That takes the heavy burden of the stressful early morning commute off Phil's shoulders. But she insists that Phil be the one to drive into the city later in the day to pick her up for the ride home.
It was such a brilliant, empathetic move.
It really is.
It keeps the routine alive. It validates his vital role in her survival. He isn't sidelined. He is the one bringing her back to safety.
And she took that need for inclusion even further.
Yeah, she did.
They established a strict, unbreakable rule. Absolutely no secondhand information when it came to her medical updates.
Think about how easy it would be to just sit in the doctor's office, take notes, and then summarize the appointment for your spouse at the dinner table.
Yeah, that's what most people do.
Right. But Cricket refused to do that. When she had her major update appointments with her oncologist, Dr. Quatra, she would call Phil, put the phone on speaker, and ensure they heard the news, whether it's triumphant or terrifying, at the exact same biological second.
Wow.
They functioned as a unified front. There was no lag in their shared reality.
She even instituted what they called a going home countdown.
I love this detail.
Me too.
Hmm.
Cricket would call Phil the very moment that second bag of medication, the pembrolizumab, the unmasker, started dripping into her arm.
Right.
And that phone call was his definitive signal. The unmasking has started. The intelligence has been delivered to the army. It's time to put your shoes on and come get me.
Yeah.
Even on the weeks she had a break from treatment, if she accidentally fell asleep and missed their usual check-in window, the phone would ring. It would be Phil, and she notes his voice would be thick with panic and concern, just asking, Are you okay?
He was tracking her vital signs from miles away.
Literally.
He was tethered to her every moment.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at the car service compromise, the speakerphone rule, the countdown, it really illuminates the immense, often invisible psychological weight of chronic illness.
It does.
It forces us to ask, how do you accept the massive logistical help you desperately need to survive without making your primary support system feel entirely obsolete?
It proves that fighting a long-term illness is, at its absolute core, a team sport.
Yeah.
Even when Cricket and Phil were physically separated by miles of highway and hospital corridors, they engineered these microwaves to ensure Phil's heartbeat was embedded in every single part of the process.
That's beautifully said.
He wasn't a spectator to her treatment. He was an active, necessary participant in her healing.
They spent 2 years building this beautiful, meticulous routine just to keep each other afloat.
2 years.
A quiet rhythm of unmasking, reinforcing, and navigating. But just as we move toward the climax of the trial, right as they were stepping across the finish line they worked so hard to reach, the narrative fractures.
We reached the 34th treatment.
The ultimate milestone.
Yeah.
This clinical trial was designed to last for exactly 2 years, which equated to precisely 34 treatments.
Right.
And Cricket describes sitting in the examination room, waiting for Dr. Quatra to walk in, bracing herself for the final scan results that would tell her if the 2 years of struggle actually worked.
And she reflects on his tell.
Yes, over 2 years of high-stakes appointments, she had learned to read her doctor.
Like playing poker.
Exactly. She says Dr. Quatra is a very quiet, measured, stoic man. But she knew that if he opened that door, walked into the room, and sat down with a genuine smile on his face, she didn't even need him to speak a single syllable.
She just knew.
She just knew the news was good. And incredibly, her 34th and final treatment happened to fall on Remembrance Day.
A profoundly fitting day.
It really is.
A day dedicated to quiet reflection, to honoring a long, grueling fight, and acknowledging the casualties of war. She had finally reached the summit.
But the clinical protocol demanded one final exhausting gauntlet before she was truly free.
Oh, right. The scans.
Yeah. Even after the 34th treatment on that Monday, she had to endure a horrific day of final baseline testing.
Mm-hmm.
A CP scan with contrast dye injected into her veins, followed by a PET scan.
That's a lot.
She describes the experience of the PET scan as cold, still, and just a deeply grueling, isolating way to spend a day inside a massive machine.
But the physical discomfort of that grueling Monday was absolutely nothing compared to the blindside that hit their home on Tuesday.
Right. Tuesday arrives, the scans are done, they should be exhaling.
They should be celebrating.
And suddenly, Phil can't breathe.
The sheer panic of that moment is unimaginable.
Oh, I can't even.
After spending 2 years hyper-focused on her breathing, her body, her survival, suddenly she is the one dialing emergency services.
Yeah.
She has to call the ambulance
Yeah.
to come and rush her husband to the hospital.
And when you find out the tragic irony of what actually caused his respiratory failure, it just takes your breath away.
It really does.
Phil had contracted the RSV virus. And when they retraced their steps to figure out how this virus breached their meticulous defenses, they traced it back to a date day.
A date day.
You're telling me that a single afternoon off from the rules is what brought the virus in?
Unbelievable.
A simple, deeply innocent attempt to step out of the bubble, to hold hands and live a normal life for just a few hours.
Yeah.
And that single attempt brought their absolute worst fear directly through their front door.
The cruelty of the timing is staggering.
It is.
Just as her long, terrifying battle was finally ending, his terrifying new battle was beginning.
Here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint, though obviously profoundly heartbreaking.
Right.
Because if you were listening to this, put yourself in Cricket's shoes for a moment. How does the human brain even begin to process a long-awaited monumental victory when a new, life-shattering crisis explodes in the exact same moment?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human resilience and trauma, what Cricket experienced is a devastating psychological paradox.
Oh.
The brain simply cannot hold both extremes of that emotional spectrum simultaneously.
No, it was short circuit.
Exactly. While she is dealing with the absolute chaos of the RSV diagnosis, while she is literally standing there watching the ambulance pull away with her husband fighting for air, her phone rings.
And it's Dr. Quatra.
It's the doctor calling with the results of Monday's scans to tell her that the 34 treatments worked,
Oh, wow.
to tell her that she is officially, unequivocally cancer-free.
It is almost unbelievable timing. It feels like a cruel joke from the universe.
And she writes about the dissociation of that moment.
Right.
She heard the words through the speaker, but she couldn't truly feel them. The victory felt entirely hollow, completely secondary to the flashing lights of the ambulance.
Yeah.
It was just clinical data on a phone line.
Because the brutal reality was she was finally safe from the microscopic monster she had been fighting for 2 years. But her anchor, the man who had been her protector, her driver, her constant reassurance through all of it, was now the one drowning in the storm.
And in that moment, she realizes a terrifying truth.
That's sad.
Deep down, she knows this is a storm he won't survive.
Oh, man.
After years of fighting side by side, expending all of his energy fighting for her survival, he simply had no fight left for his own. The reserves were empty.
She writes that she realized her final role as his partner wasn't to help him recover. Her final role was to help him navigate the end.
He gathered every last ounce of strength he had left in his body. He looked at her, and he whispered his final request. I want to go home.
And that is the exact moment the cancer-free news from Dr. Quatra finally took on its true, devastating meaning for her.
Exactly. The news of her remission wasn't a reason to celebrate.
No.
It wasn't a joyous victory lap. That medical update became the vital psychological armor she needed to stand steady in that hospital room.
Wow, that's powerful.
It gave her the definitive proof that she was going to survive, which in turn gave her the strength to grant Phil his final permission to let go.
He needed to know she was safe before he could rest. The monster was gone. His job as her protector was finished.
So she could look at him, wearing that armor, and offer the last words she would ever speak to her husband. Okay, let's get you home.
It is an incredible, humbling testament to the profound sacrifices made in the name of love.
It really is. What a monumental journey. We started by looking at the incredible cutting-edge science of unmasking cancer cells at a microscopic level, and we ended in the quiet, heartbreaking, deeply human sacrifices of marriage and caregiving.
It perfectly illustrates that survival is never just a biological equation. It is deeply relational.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you listening right now with a lingering thought.
Okay.
I want you to think back to that date day that brought the RSV virus into their home.
Yeah, that fateful day.
Cricket and Phil had lived in a protective, claustrophobic, suffocating bubble for years, enduring the Woolworths direct-to-boot runs and the crack of dawn tactical grocery missions.
Right. And the single solitary moment they stepped out of that bubble to reclaim just a tiny sliver of normal, vibrant life, it triggered the final tragedy.
It raises an incredibly difficult question about the human condition itself.
Exactly. At what point does the cost of simply surviving outweigh the act of actually living?
Right.
Is the total clinical safety of the bubble worth the vibrant, messy, beautiful life you miss out on while you're hiding inside it? If you spend your entire life just trying to avoid the end, did you actually live at all? It is something to seriously mull over.
Because the muddy waters of risk are where the actual living happens.
They really are. Thank you for joining us on this incredible deep dive today. We will catch you on the next one.
Thank you for staying with us through Part 8. I know that was a lot to hold, and we appreciate you sharing in this moment as we honor Phil's memory and the impact he left behind. It's never easy to reach the end of a chapter like this, but even in the hardest parts of the fight, there is a reason we keep telling the story. Take a little extra time for yourself today, and perhaps hold your loved ones a bit closer. I'm Ava, and it has been an honor to host this episode for you. We'll be back to continue the journey soon. Until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time at the corner.